Hello everybody, this is Mr. Cloud, and this is the video version of the core content notes for Lesson 6A. Lesson 6A is such a big lesson that we actually have to split it up into two separate lessons, so this is 6A Part 1. And whether you're watching the video or you're simply reading this content, make sure you fill out this section of your core content notes for class. Also, quick reminder, remember at the end of this, you need to take your KIA online learning check in order to get the full credit for this experience. Please don't guess around those things. You should really pay attention as we go through so you can be able to answer the questions correctly and just be done with it. All right, without further ado, the big idea about this particular lesson is now that we're focused on the federal government, we need to know how the federal government works. The federal, of course, means the national government. First note is the legislative, executive, and judicial powers of the national or federal government are distributed among three distinct and independent branches of government. So there's three branches of government completely separate from each other, and they're the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. And for the rest of this lesson, we are going to focus on the legislative branch. The legislative branch is described in Article 1 of the Constitution. So the federal legislature, the legislative branch, is called Congress. Its main job is to make the laws for the national government. Congress is a bicameral legislature. The word bicameral means that it's made up of two separate houses described below. Anytime you see bi as a prefix to a word, like bicycle, it's going to mean two. In this case, Congress is made up of two houses. Those two houses are here. There is the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. You need to know the following things about each. The House of Representatives is made up of 435 members. Currently, we have that many people serving. Each member of the House represents a congressional district within a state. So Virginia has so many congressional districts. Each one of those districts has one member of the House. The number of the members of the House a state gets is determined by that state's population. In other words, more people in the states equals more members of the House. The House's special power that the Senate doesn't have and no one else has is the power to begin all bills that may lead to an increase in taxes. Bills, as we'll learn in a moment, is another name for a potential law. So the Senate can't do this, only the House can start the bills that would lead to a federal tax increase. Now, the interesting dynamic about the House is House members are up for re-election more often than and they're up for re-election more often because that makes them more responsive. So they are more responsive to the changes in the people's opinions. They're up every 2 years. So every 2 years, if there's some sort of drastic change in the way the country wants our government to go, then they can vote in new people and they don't have to wait around for a long time. You'll see that's the opposite over here in the Senate. So the second house of Congress is called the U.S. Senate. Very different house. They have 100 senators as opposed to the 435 over here. There's 2 senators per state, regardless of the population. Each senator represents his or her entire state, not just a district like the members of the House over here. The Senate's special powers, there's 2 of them. They have the ability to confirm, in other words, approve, presidential appointments of top government officials, like the heads of agencies and judges. The president gets to appoint a lot of folks to work in the federal government, especially the heads of federal governments, important judges, the Department of Defense Secretary, the head of the FBI. But the Senate actually gets the ability to approve them or not approve them. This is called confirmation. So they could say, you know what, we understand, Mr. President, that you want this person to lead the FBI, but we're saying no. And then the president has to go back and find somebody else. The second power they have is the ability to ratify, and you should know that from when we talked about the amendments. Ratify means approve treaties with other countries. So occasionally America has to enter a formal contract treaty kind of relationship with another country to say we're going to end this war or we're going to help you out with this situation or whatever. The president can negotiate those and actually kind of put together the treaty, but the treaty isn't in effect until the Senate ratifies it. The Senate gets to approve, not the House. Now, the other thing that the founders of our Constitution, the framers, wanted is the senators were up for or are up for re-election less often than members of the House, so the Senate has more long-term stability. And they're all not up for re-election at the same time. They stagger it out. So they get these great long 6-year terms, much longer than members of Congress. When you become a senator, you tend to be a senator for a longer period of time. You get re-elected more often. And that creates a sense of stability. Whereas on the other hand, the founders wanted the House to be kind of chaotic and changing as the nation changes. So that's the differences between the two houses, but there's a lot of stuff where both of the houses work together to do, and we're going to examine some of those. Both the House and the Senate have to pass identically worded versions of bills. You may remember for a few moments ago, bills is another name for potential new laws. So a law before it's been signed by the president and official is called a bill. And both the Senate and the House have to pass identically worded versions. And they can pass that with the 51% or greater majority before it's sent on to the president. So once it arrives at the president, he or she can sign it or veto it, whatever, right? If they sign it, it becomes a law. If they veto it, nope, it is not a law. So the House and the Senate have to work together to get the wording just right before they send it over. Both houses also work together to approve the annual budget for how the federal government will spend its money. Part of this process is for them to agree on how much tax revenue and other levies are like taxes, are to be collected from the citizens in order to pay for all the things Congress wants to do. So the federal government does a lot of stuff. They send up space stuff, the satellites, NASA things. They occasionally invade other countries. They set up highway systems. They fund college programs. They help farmers. There's lots of stuff the federal government does. It needs money to do those things. So it tries to figure out where are we going to get all that money and how are we going to best spend it for the American people. And also, I should note here that they approve the annual budget. It's actually the president's job to start the annual budget and send it to Congress, and then Congress approves it. Sort of the opposite over here of the laws. Here in the laws, Congress makes the first attempt at a bill, sends it to the president for approval. Here, the president makes a budget and sends it to Congress for approval. Only Congress has the ability to declare war. And notice I put that in quotes there. So that's the official declaration of war. The last time they did that was in World War II, right? We used to do it. We don't do it so much anymore. The president can fight wars without Congress's approval, and he has been doing that for quite a while. All wars since World War II were fought without Congress actually declaring it a war. So they weren't really formally a war. We'll talk more about this in class. Congress sets up the rules for how our country trades with other countries and how each state trades with the other states. For example, Congress sets up standard weights and measures so that a mile or a pound in Virginia has the same meaning as in the rest of the other 49 states, which we all kind of take that for granted, but no, it's Congress that makes that happen. This is why things like light bulbs can work in any state interchangeably. If we didn't have these rules, there might be one way of having certain light bulbs in Tennessee, and Maryland would be completely different, and you'd have to change them at the borders. No, we don't do that because Congress regulates this. This is called standardization. So things are standardized across the entire nation because Congress writes those rules. It's called interstate commerce. And a quick reminder here, Congress can start the process to amend the U.S. Constitution. And as we've learned about in class, they start it, they send it to the state legislatures, and then if enough of them approve it, the Constitution is amended. Those are the basic facts you need to know about the legislative branch. Of course, there are study questions for you to look over. We'll do that in class. And then our next class, we'll get into the powers of the executive and judicial branch. You can read ahead if you wish. You don't have to. All right, go ahead and stop and go over to the key assignment. Best of luck there. I'll see you in class.